Welcome to the third episode of the Trailside podcast. In this series, I'll be speaking with cyclists from all over the world that are part of the Kona Ambassador Cycling Programme. In this episode, I speak to Tim Wiggins about cycling and racing for Wiggle, moving from road racing to off-road cycling, and exploring Europe by bike. Thanks for coming along. Now, I know I did meet you once before in the past, if I remember right. I think it was at the Dirty Reaver. And I took some photos of your bike to send to Kona for you because you were there on your titanium Rove, I think it was.
Yes, yeah. That was a good day. Yeah. That must be. I don't know how many years ago that was. 2017, maybe 2018. It
would have been. Yeah, I went over once, all right, and yeah, it was definitely a few years ago at this point. But yeah, that was a nice weekend. Cold morning in the start, but the rain held off all day long at least, and big turnout as always for the Dirty Reaver.
Yeah, no, it was very cool. I think that was one of my first events on the Rove Titanium, which I had at that point built up with a Lauf fork, which I think was actually quite an advantage on that Dirty Reaver course. There was quite a lot of kind of rock slabs and actually quite difficult descents, which would have been challenging on a kind of out and out fixed gravel bike. But no, that bike now is primarily my kind of long distance touring bike. So it's gone through a bit of a transformation. It's got a kind of a rack on it and a fixed carbon fork and slightly more kind of road orientated gearing and stuff. But it's done some fairly significant miles now.
Cool. Awesome. So I suppose if we can maybe just start off, if you just tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of how cycling is involved in your life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been cycling probably for as long as I can remember. I live now on the Isle of Wight. I also grew up here. I moved away for a few years. But for those that don't know, the Isle of Wight's a kind of small island off the south coast of the UK, which is a little bit like a microcosm of Cornwall or maybe Devon, but actually kind of a fair bit closer to southeast England and kind of London than Cornwall or Devon. But very good riding here. So I've been riding for a long time. I kind of started competitively riding bikes, I suppose, doing orienteering mountain biking when I was in my early teens. I then actually moved away and did coastal rowing for a while, which is something which water sports end up being a feature of living on an island quite often. But then I came back to compete in mountain biking in 2011 for what's called the Island Games, which is like a kind of mini Olympics for islands from all over the world. So you get people coming from Jamaica and Barbados and the Faroe Islands and lots of different places. So I kind of took mountain biking up when I was asked to represent the Isle of Wight in that event, which was on the Isle of Wight that year. It varies. It moves around different islands all over the world. And I got back into mountain biking then. And then when I graduated from university, I'd spent a few years during university concentrating actually mostly on road racing. But when I graduated from university, I started working for Wiggle, which most people will know as one of the kind of big online retailers in the UK and globally, and raced quite a lot on the road still then overseas with Team Wiggle, which was the staff sponsored team. And then I think I picked up my first Kona in 2016, which was the kind of original looking Kona Private Jake, which I still maintain was one of the first gravel bikes ever released. It was effectively a cyclocross bike designed by mountain bikers, so it would take 40C tires and you could ride it a lot more aggressively than you could a kind of traditional cyclocross bike. That's taken me on many adventures. I think I've still got that bike and still use it every week. It's done now close to 50,000 kilometers, I think. So it's a well-used rig. But at the same time as getting the private Jake, I also started doing a lot more long distance riding and racing. So events like the Dirty Reaver, which for those that don't know, that's a 200k gravel race in Scotland on the Scottish borders. And I've also been off racing on the private Jake in Switzerland and in the Italian Alps and places as well, doing kind of cyclocross / gravel stage racing. The Kona Rove, which we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier, is like my long distance touring bike. So I've done some fairly kind of mammoth trips on that. Things like Copenhagen in Denmark to Andorra via the Swiss Alps and the Italian Alps. So that was like a 2.5 week trip that was 3,200 miles. 3,200 kilometers. With a fair bit of climbing in there as well. And I've done a number of other trips, like riding back, flew out to Rome with the bike and then rode back to Holland. Have done the kind of north coast of Scotland, west coast of Ireland, west coast of Wales as one trip as well. So the Rove has very much become my kind of like long distance touring bike. Really great bike, incredibly comfortable to ride. The Kona Private Jake's still my kind of cyclocross race rig. And I do also have a Kona Sutra Limited, which is a bike which I built up with the intention of doing the Tour Divide event in 2020, which unfortunately was curbed or shelved because of COVID. So a number of Konas in the stable, and all of them have quite different kind of stories and purposes behind them.
That sounds pretty awesome. You've definitely gotten around a lot on those bikes. What did you say, about 50,000 kilometers on the Jake?
On the Kona Private Jake, yeah. I used that for commuting into work for many years, which was a sort of 30 kilometers each way trip, which helped to rack up a significant number of miles on it. Yeah. But it's also just a fantastic bike to ride. I mean, I've ridden, very high end gravel bikes, stuff like the Fruity Explorer, and the kind of Ridley Can So Fast and stuff like that. And I still find that the Private Jake is just, it has the ability that you can kind of just let it go, and it rides like a mountain bike almost on an off-road downhill and stuff. So it's it's really good fun, and it just has me going back and picking it up every time and time again. So
yeah, cool. And so while you were road cycling, as you said, road racing, were you kind of, was that part of Wiggle? Was that in the same kind of time? Were you on the team of your employer, or were you doing this kind of privately? Like, were you one of the people that was lucky enough to get on board a team, or were you kind of roughing it out like some of the other guys and just do a privateer and go to all the races that you can and training as much as you can and trying to hold down a job as well at the same time?
I was doing a full-time office job for Wiggle, but I was effectively also sponsored by Wiggle. So we used to receive team bikes, which varied from, unfortunately, none of them were ever Konas, but they were Felts or Eastways or Vitas bikes, and we had a team of sort of 10 of us, I suppose, 5 to 6 maybe, that were actively competing a lot. And we were going off and road racing as far afield as the Italian Dolomites, but also, kind of locally around the south of the UK and Wales and stuff like that. So, a lot of good times then. And that was kind of during, I suppose, the real boom in road cycling in the UK following the 2012 kind of Olympic success, Tour de France success. So it was a really great time to be on the road cycling scene. But then I think I probably had that realization more, or that kind of urge to explore more, that a lot of people have found recently with gravel cycling. So we've seen a huge boom in people turning from road cycling towards gravel cycling in recent years. And I think I probably made that switch actually back in 2017, something like that. So I did moved away from doing less road racing and doing more off-road racing. So both mountain bike and gravel, and kind of doing a lot more events overseas as well. So Denmark and Italy and France and stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah, some very cool events. I think one of my favourite was probably the Hero Dolomites race, which is set in the Dolomites, obviously, but it's a mountain bike race, which has about 4,500 riders take part in it, and it's 87 kilometres, but with 4,500 meters of climbing. So it's
ouch.
It's a lot of up and down. So you're at proper mountain bike racing. So yeah, I
can't imagine doing that amount of climbing within one race. Like that just seems insane. But at least as if you're going up, you get to come back down again.
Yes, you do. Yeah. Although in the context of that race, I seem to remember the coming down was a little bit like hanging your ass over the back seat and praying for God that you didn't go over the handlebars because it was so incredibly steep. But yeah, phenomenal experience. It's a really cool event to take part in. And then some of the gravel bike events I've done in Switzerland, which the Tour cyclocross, as they're called. Those are like a 3-day stage race on a gravel bike, and one of them is set in winter. So you race up above the snow line during the stages, which is a really cool experience. And then everyone stays in one hotel down at the so it's quite a kind of race, kind of a mini festival atmosphere as well.
And so each stage starts and finishes from the same spot, like the same kind of town by the hotel?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which, it was a really cool format. So you basically, the event takes over a hotel, and then you go off and do the first afternoon is like a fast, furious crit just close by to the hotel. And then the Saturday and Sunday are much further off-road, kind of actually like single track and kind of double track through the forests and stuff, riding, which to me is always what, I think I've always sort of pushed the limits of what gravel really entails. And I much prefer to kind of tend towards events that do that. So gravel can be quite basically like a, small pea-sized gravel that you're riding on around big pine forests and stuff like that, or it can be really actually pushing what you can do on a bike with a fixed fork and 40C tires, sort of thing. I've always tended to go for the latter, so I've sort of been effectively riding mountain bike trails on a gravel bike, which is actually where the Kona Sutra really comes into its own, because that will fit pretty substantial tires. I've got 50C tires on that at the moment, and you can ride that with wide handlebars almost like a mountain bike, especially because the steel frame just means that you're kind of not wincing every time you hit a bump or rock.
Yeah, I had a Sutra for a while, the Sutra Limited. I think it was an orange one, but it was more of a custom build. So I had the frame and fork, but I had they were 650 wheels, but they were like cross-country mountain bike wheels. So I had loads of clearance for tires and wide rims, and I think I had mountain bike gearing on it with a mix of like 105 hydraulic brakes and shifters, but with like Shimano SLX cranks and a huge cassette on the back. So if I was cycling on the road, once you kind of hit about 30 kilometers an hour, your legs are going crazy, but you're not going anywhere. But I took it down some crazy routes and over some seriously rough gravel, and I don't have it anymore, but I use a Libre now. But there's one thing that I really liked about the steel frame was even though it was heavy, it was just so comfortable. I kind of look back and wish I never got rid of it.
Yeah, no, I can remember I went out to a Kona press camp out in Austria, I think it was, in 2017, 2018, something like that, and rode the Sutra when it was first released. And I can remember thinking then, riding it around a bike park in Austria, but actually it was a really capable bike. And yeah, it is. I've got kind of those Ritchie sweep handlebars on mine, and it's still got the original wheel set actually and group set on there. But yeah, it is just a really cool bike, and ride it with a very short stem, a relatively large frame size, but with a very short stem, so it feels more responsive as well, which is very cool. I say that bike was basically built up with the intention of doing the Tour Divide in 2020, which was all booked but didn't come to fruition because of the pandemic. But it's still kind of on the cards to do something a bit like that, whether it's Tour Divide or a kind of full length of New Zealand or something like that. Another big kind of off-road tour.
Yeah. A full length of New Zealand sounds pretty big. Like I haven't really heard much about any kind of gravel events or racing events down that side. So is it a big thing over there? I know there's I know mountain biking and downhill is pretty big in New Zealand, but I wasn't aware of any kind of gravel stuff going on.
Yeah, they do an event called, I can never pronounce it correctly, but it's a Tour Aotearoa, which is actually like a mapped route and an official tour with start times and everything. So I don't think they classify it as a race, but I think they do register times and things. So there is an official event that you can do which runs the full length of the country. And it's somewhere that I've got family out that live in New Zealand, but I've never actually been out to visit. So it's kind of a double reason to go out there. The scenery looks incredible, proper Lord of the Rings territory, obviously, and it's it'd be a really cool event to do. I don't know whether I'd do it, fully self-sufficient, or do it a bit more like a relaxed tour where meet friends and stuff that might be doing it at the same time in a motorhome in the evenings and stuff like that, and avoid having to carry quite so much kit and enjoy the riding a bit more free and light. But yeah, want to hopefully plan for a few years' time.
And are you getting many long distance touring cycles in these days? Like with using your Rove, or like, and is there much long distance cycling to be done on the Isle of Wight? Would you have to get the ferry over to the mainland UK or head off to Europe?
If you were to do long distance cycling on the Isle of Wight, you would probably end up going back on yourself quite a lot. Although I have designed a number of 200 kilometre gravel routes on the island, which don't go on the same track twice, which is quite impressive.
That's not too bad.
But no, I have been doing some trips. I've got a girlfriend that lives in Manchester, so that's a fair distance from the Isle of Wight. She's up there for another 6 months doing a postgrad degree, and I back in January this year, I made the attempt to ride from home up to Manchester on the Rove in one day with a fully loaded set of panniers. Which was going to be 370 kilometres, and I got to about 280. I got to Wolverhampton, which is just kind of north of Birmingham, which was a long day out. 280k is still a long way to ride on a fully loaded touring bike in January. So I am still, and I actually did it again later with a friend over 3 days. We rode up to the kind of Cotswolds on the first day, and then into mid Wales for the second day, and then I rode on to Manchester on the third day. So those have actually been my only two kind of bike tours this year. There's been a bit of a kind of other stuff on to take up the time, and but yeah, I definitely still enjoy that touring feeling, and really enjoy doing A to B riding in particular, even that, if that's just like a day ride. I think it's really cool to see how far you can get on a bike, and kind of where your kind of mental capabilities and physical capabilities can get you to. So.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've always kind of wanted to try. And I mainly kind of mountain bike and off road, but I do have the pannier rack and all the bags to throw onto my gravel bike and head off. But I've so many of these kind of little routes planned out where, like, you know, you'd go somewhere and you'd pitch a tent for the day or something and then come back the next day. Like all these kind of dreams and aspirations that I just never have gotten around to getting around and doing. But yeah, I definitely want to do that. I know it's winter time here, so there's not much chance of happening, but I don't know, maybe next summer I can nail down a couple of the dates and say, right, this is happening. Doesn't matter what's going on, just have to get it done, and then, you know, don't give myself any excuses.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. My format of doing long distance tours I pretty much did a long distance tour every year from 2016 until 2019, I suppose, 2020. So whether those were ones over in, so I did the first tour I actually did on the private Jake with kind of a full on bike packing setup rather than a rack and panniers. And that one I caught the ferry to Santander, which is on the north coast of Spain, and then rode along the north coast of Spain, down the length of the Pyrenees to a friend near Carcassonne, and then rode back up the west coast of France, so kind of Bordeaux, Vendée, into Brittany, and then caught a ferry back from Brittany. And the way that I suppose you commit to doing a tour like that is that once you've got on that ferry and you've landed on the north coast of Spain, you've got only one way home, to ride your bike. So it sort of forces you to do it much the same as say, I flew to Rome with the Rove in 2018 and rode back from Rome to Holland and then back down to the Isle of Wight from Harwich, where the Holland ferry goes into, and that's much the same thing. You know, once you've got off that plane in Rome, then you're kind of riding a bike to get somewhere. But there's also an element of real freedom in doing that. I think that you know, I've most of the time always wild camped, occasionally book into hotels or pre-booked into hotels. But it gives you that ability to quite literally just see how far you can get each day, depending on how you're feeling and how how the weather is and stuff. And I've often stayed with friends and family kind of en route, which gives you a bit of a milestone to aim for. So you kind of know how much you want to be doing each day so that you arrive with them on time. But it's a very unique kind of freedom just to be able to ride through numerous countries and numerous terrains and environments, and experience some really incredible culture and food and meet different people all along the route.
So obviously you'd have your route planned out. So when you arrive somewhere and you know you want to cycle back, you've got your route that you're going to follow. But if you are wild camping and if you don't have anywhere particular to stay, as you said, you just kind of see how far you can go. Like, just say you have a week set aside, you know, have you got that planned out far in advance so that you kind of have an idea of, okay, I need to do at least 50k or at least 100k every single day, otherwise I'll fall behind? Or do you try and push ahead of yourself to leave yourself with, you know, an extra day of rest at the end? Or what way would you kind of plan out and doing it?
Yeah, so I tend to plan out the routes pretty completely, really. So I know, you know, that on that one day I'll aim to do however far it is, somewhere between 180 if it's a hilly day or 240 if it's a flat day, in one go. And then I'll know that lands me in, say, a forest, which looks like it might be a suitable place to find a wild camp away from a civilization or something. That kind of works very well most of the time until, like, you have a big mechanical or something and you lose half a day, and then you end up, you know, kind of like playing catch up and doing either some huge days or, well, probably doing some huge days, but also camping in some less than perfect kind of places, which has happened once or twice. But that's all part of the enjoyment, I suppose, and also the thrill of doing something like that is that you have to be quite adaptable. Even if you've planned literally the route down to every day, things will happen. Things will develop that mean that you have to do something a bit different.
Yeah. I know while I was working a few years back when I was in a bike shop, we just had this random person just cycle along one day with a huge trailer full of stuff on this old bike that he got from Decathlon about 15 years previous. He was a Frenchman. I can't remember his name. I think it was Yannick. I probably butchered his name, but he has literally cycled. He said he cycled on every continent bar. I think it was South America. And he just rocked up to the bike shop, said, "Oh, do you mind if I fix my bike?" And we said, "Yeah, what do you need help with?" And he said, No, it's okay. I have everything here I need." And he spills out a pile of loose bolts and nuts and tools onto the floor and just starts digging through so he can fix one of the wheels on his trailer. So, we made him a cup of coffee and we were chatting away to him, and he was saying that, yeah, pretty much everything that he has spare for his bike, he just picks up off the ground along the way. And so, like, if he needs to stop somewhere to fix his bike, he just like, "Oh yeah, there's a bolt on the ground, I'll take that with me because I'll need it at some point." And he was there fixing his bike away and fixing his trailer. He didn't have any kind of GPS with him. He had an old, just, the basic little computer with a magnet on the wheel, and there was something like 80 something thousand kilometers on it, I think. Like he cycled all over, he's cycled through Russia, all over the Middle East, around Asia, and all over the place. And I think he said the best roads in the world, I think he said, were in Iran. Because they have these huge motorways that are 7-8 lanes wide for all the oil trucks, and there's nothing but oil trucks. And he said they're the smoothest and they're the best quality roads he's ever cycled on, as long as you're not getting constantly beeped at by these giant trucks. And he was telling us about how somebody was driving past him in their camper van, and they were pointing out the window, and he didn't know what they were saying, but then I think somebody snapped a photo of him. And then he found out about 2 weeks later that he nearly went kind of mini viral on Twitter because he didn't realize, but from cycling along those roads surrounded by the huge trucks, he was from head to toe completely black with just dirt and soot from the trucks. And they had this photo of him, of this guy that looked like he's just after coming out of a coal mine on on a bicycle. But yeah, he had some pretty cool stories, and it's great to see that people can just kind of go for a wander on their bike. And he would have been wild camping. He had a little tent and he just cycled along the road, and he feels like he's done enough cycling for the day. If he sees a gate in the side of a wall, he'll just kind of go through the gate and hide down behind the wall and pitch his tent where he won't be seen or disturb anybody. And I can't imagine doing that. For me, like, that would be, no, I'd have to have it planned. I'd have to have, I know this, I'm not going to camp in a field. I'd have to have a campsite because I don't know what's going to go wrong, and I'll wake up and there'll be cows sniffing at the tent door, or I'll anger some farmer and he'll be pointing his shotgun at me because I'm on his land or something like that. I don't think wild camping would be suitable for me in my mindset. I'd be too kind of panicky. But that's just, I suppose, here in Ireland. Like, what was it like around Europe? Is there different laws, or is it a little bit more kind of acceptable to, like, if you're in a woods, can you just pitch a tent and be left alone?
Well, I have wild camped in Ireland actually on quite a few occasions, but yeah, it's. I mean, wild camping, I suppose, is one of those things. It's, there are places where it is legal, and there obviously is a right to roam, and you're entitled to camp for a night or two, as long as you obviously don't damage anything, and it's not, it's not an offence to camp there, sort of thing. But my general experience, I think, is that I have also camped in places where you're often on private land. Or kind of communal land, I suppose. And I think that, I've written some stuff about it for my blog, in terms of the best way to do it. And I think if you turn up on a bicycle, late in the evening, pitch up a tent, and keep your campsite tidy from the moment that you get there to the moment you leave, and you don't leave any kind of trace that you've been there, then most landowners will not be too troubled by it. I've had I can remember one of the first tours that I did back in 2011 or something. We were camping in a field in France, and just as we were about to go to sleep, these huge headlights kind of like shone through the fabric of the tent, and it was was the farmer and his tractor, and the tractor was a massive thing with pitchforks on the front, and it just had this kind of thing going through your head that he was just going to pick up the whole tent on the front of his tractor and dump it outside on the road. But actually, he was very nice about it. He just stopped and had a chat, and he was just getting some food for his cows, and he had spotted the two tents and came over to see what we were doing. He didn't ask us to move on. We left the next morning, and it was all fine. So it's something which can be done with a good degree of kind of sensitivity, and often you can just ask people as well. If you so it's ask a landowner, ask a farmer or something if you can just camp at the bottom of the field. And I've actually had an experience in Germany, for example, when I asked a lady if she knew anywhere where I could camp because I was getting a bit desperate to find a campsite. And she said, well, you can camp in my back garden, follow me back to the house. Got back to the house, and she said, actually, just have a spare room, just come in and stay in the house. Do you want any dinner? So,
oh, wow.
So, it can work to your favor if you ask as well. People are generally very hospitable towards cyclists. I think they're fairly inoffensive humans.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Like just the fact that some stranger would be kind enough to be, come along and do you want some food? Here's a bed and a shower you can have for the night. And I suppose when you're cycling all day long and you're getting up the next day and you have to go cycle another long day and you just feel like, God, I just want a hot shower so I can just feel clean.
Yeah. Doing it when it's cold and wet into the rain, a hot shower becomes like gold in your mind. I think it's a bit cycling through the south of France or the Alps or something in the summer months. You can quite happily pitch up by a river at the end of the day and just have a wash in the river, which is equally as fantastic. But no, I had the trip that I did down the northwest coast of Scotland, and then I crossed over to Ireland and went down the west coast of Ireland back in 2019. That trip, the weather was just always against me. So the weather turned on the west coast of Scotland and was just sort of gale force 8, force 9, headwind, driving rain. And after, I can remember after a couple of days of that, I checked into a hotel and just rerouted myself and went further inland in Scotland and then through to Ireland. Then it happened again in Ireland, but I had the first day with glorious sunshine, and then it was again gale force headwinds and these tiny little roads going up and down. And I got to about Sligo on the west coast, and then rerouted back across. And I was meant to be going down the entire west coast and then coming Rosslare, Fishguard, ferry route back to Wales, but I ended up kind of diverting across and doing the ferry from Dublin to Holyhead instead, and then riding back down through Wales in the middle of a heat wave, which was quite that was definitely the right decision. But there's there's flexibility in everything you do. And I think sometimes you do just really crave having a warm shower and a comfortable bed if you're putting up with riding through kind of unpleasant conditions for a long time. And when you do treat yourself to that, then it really feels well worth it. So it's
Do you ever find that there's much of a language barrier when you're traveling across mainland Europe? If you're going from France to Spain to Germany to Italy, like is the majority of people, do they speak well enough English, or can you speak French or German or Italian or Spanish or?
I can speak a little bit of French, and that's about it. But to be honest, much as I hate to say it, they're so much better at speaking English than we are speaking in languages. You kind of end up just trying, and then they're like, "Oh, you're English," and you revert to speaking in English. But no, I speak enough French certainly to be able to get by, and yeah, just sort of muddle your way through with a bit of sign language in the other countries as well. So
just point at things and make noises.
Yeah. But yeah, it's all part of the experience.
Well, that's pretty amazing. You've definitely lived quite an exciting life when it comes to cycling and exploring and adventuring and touring and racing and everything in between. But yeah, that's pretty awesome. And well, thanks for coming on and having a chat with me about your kind of cycling experience. And I appreciate you giving me your time this afternoon.
No, thanks to chat. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if the readers would be aware, but I write Life in the Saddle, which is a blog which has been going for over 10 years or so now. So you can kind of find all of those stories and a fair bit of advice on stuff like wild camping and bikepacking food and kit and stuff.
Cool.
On there. So it's lifeinthesaddle.cc. So if you have any kind of questions as well, you can just shoot me a comment on the blog or a message on Instagram or Twitter or something, and I can come back to you with my personal experiences and suggestions and things on bike adventures.
So lifeinthesaddle.cc is your blog website, and are your social media names the same? Is it Life in the Saddle on Instagram and Twitter or Facebook or YouTube?
I'm Tim Wiggins 1 on Instagram, and Tim Wiggins 1 with no underscore on Twitter. So yeah, you can find it all. They're all linked from the blog, so it's got kind of the social media profile links on there as well. So
great, awesome. Right, thank you very much.